Disney Marvel movies aren't cinema. Scorsese was right, partly. Remember when Martin Scorsese launched a grenade into the cultural landscape by saying that Disney Marvel movies weren't cinema? His argument was essentially that they were more like amusement parks. There's no risk, there's nothing unexpected. We might say that there's no encounter with any sort of otherness. We're just fed back to us what we already want. But, I mean, what's wrong with amusement, right? Well, the word amuse derives from various terms that can mean deception, or merely holding one's attention, or to stare stupidly. In this state of amusement, there is no rational agency, no activity on the part of the observer. In his classic book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Neil Postman famously wrote about how television was a sort of soma, which is a reference to the classic dystopian novel, A Brave New World. For Postman, television media is all form but with zero content. And this form produces a mindless attention to whatever is being presented. I think this is kinda what Scorsese is getting at when he on Disney Marvel films. These products, I mean, can we even call them films anymore? Are like large-scale opiates for the masses. Of course, remember, as a good philosopher, I love big butts. So, but what guides the production of this opiate? What are its effects? And what can we learn about the world system by examining it? Last video, we looked at the work of Michel Fair to help us understand how the world system is obsessed with creating and maintaining and then optimizing ratings. At the individual level, this means we always want to acquire and expand a portfolio of social assets so that we can court investment from other people, getting their attention onto our personal brands. At the corporate level, we see something similar. And this is the key for how we can understand products like Marvel films, among others, as primarily financial assets that boost the rating of the corporations that have proprietary ownership over them. For Fair, in the so-called golden age of capitalism, and before, to be fair, what mattered for corporations was profit.
I'm really rich.
So they invested in opportunities insofar as they were deemed to be profitable. Yeah? What this led to in what's called the late Fordist era was a necessary compromise between capital on the one hand and labor on the other hand.
In 1938, Congress passed a law called the Fair Labor Standards Act, which set the 40-hour work week, regulated child labor, and set standards for minimum wage and overtime pay. Workers were also able to negotiate health benefit plans from their employers.
This was essentially a compromise about the distribution of profits. Give enough to workers so they won't strike, but don't take too much from the capitalists so that they will continue their domestic production. But something has changed, because now profits are not central anymore, but ratings. And this changes how corporations determine their own activities, which primarily takes the form of their ability to maintain their market cap in the form of their stock valuation, and then of course an endless supply of access to cheap credit. And with low interest rates, zero or even negative interest rates in some circumstances, this means it's actually cheaper to just endlessly borrow money than it is to have to dig into your own pockets or the pockets of your investors in order to produce and manufacture. So what this incentivizes on the one hand is the expansion of credit and debt, and on the other hand, the ever-intensifying return on investment that goes back into speculative financial assets.
We can't lose. Let's bet it all.
Now this has many consequences. Slowed production and manufacturing, increased shareholder power, outsourcing to foreign markets, and centralization. And this is probably what's most worrying about this, because it leads to a type of what we might call funneling system. That is a type of bottleneck where all the investments tend to just flow to the same place. And this is because these opportunities are deemed to be the most valuable in terms of giving returns. So there's no real incentive to go elsewhere. Just keep plunging resources into those same places. So to return to the cinema example, this most likely means that we're just gonna keep getting more and more and more and more of the same. I mean, why would they change their strategy, right? So long as they can keep driving eyeballs and stimulating emotional attention, that is investment, and of course getting people hitched to the trajectory of the product itself, and of course the larger brand, the more they're just gonna keep priming those pumps. And of course, receiving huge returns for their shareholders in the process. In this world, we are stuck in what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the inferno of the same. But What do you think? Does FAIR's emphasis on cheap credit, on rating, does it make sense of the current global socioeconomic system? Does it help our critical and analytical lenses actually make sense of the way that contemporary corporations operate? What are other implications of this that we might be able to think of? Issues on the horizon or things facing us at the moment? I mean, if profits don't really matter as much and it's all about maintaining rating and just keep getting access to cheap credit, and then of course you get the proliferation of what are called zombie corporations, how does this affect corporate strategy, and then what impact does that have on domestic economies that are feeling the brunt of this shift? And then of course, what about how this affects the products that are produced? Like, let's look at Disney Marvel films. And then of course, is this all just some sort of snobby, overcritical, pretentious way of trying to take the fun out of what should just be a fun freaking movie-going experience, dude? I don't know. What do you think? I think there's a lot here that we can kind of help each other think through. So please comment down below. Of course, as always, I'm going to place some resources down there so that you can do some further reading. And then yes, please like, subscribe, share, get people involved in this convo. I love you, everybody. Have a good one.